if you want to be able to charge cash to somebody, you have to show them that you can help them. Of course, some of this comes down to how you speak to them, your intake process, talking to them about what their goals are, communicating confidently that you have a path to help them get there, that you're going to be their partner on this journey to help them get there, and then being able to show them very quickly that you can at least make some positive change.
Good to see you again, though, man. And it's good to, we've had you on the podcast. That was probably, a couple of years ago last.
Yeah.
Then I had one of your team members doing a Facebook Live, I think back in November or December.
It was right before your conference. It was leading up to the conference.
Yes. All right, cool. And then you guys were thankfully sponsors at the conference back in September. So it was good to see your team there. So it's good to have you back, man.
Heck yeah. Good to see you.
Yeah, we've got to do this every so often. So we're talking today about adding athletic performance or cash-based services to your clinic. And this is right up your alley, right? You guys work with a lot of professional sports teams, collegiate teams, athletes of all kinds, right, to improve performance. But you also provide a product that is cash-based, and you can build a cash-based service around, frankly, right? So you guys, I shouldn't say you guys, NeuFit is coming from a space of a lot of knowledge regarding this. And so I'm excited to have you on and talk about it in general.
Yeah, thank you. Then for you listening to this, you may know us at NeuFit more for the physical therapy applications, the rehab applications of the Neubie device, neurobioelectric stimulator. And the interesting thing when we talk about, that question of how can you use the same thing for athletic performance, or sort of, what are you talking about? Is this just like something, is it a panacea? Is it a cure-all? But there's a really interesting common thread that I just think it's worth mentioning for a moment to connect the dots here, whether we're talking about an NFL football player like Saquon Barkley recovering from an ACL surgery or a sprained ankle, or whether we're talking about someone recovering from just chronic low back pain, right, whether we're talking about someone who's had a stroke, spinal cord injury, or we're talking about someone looking to improve fitness or performance, there's a common thread throughout all of that, and that is the nervous system, because the nervous system controls, of course, how the body heals and recovers and hopefully effectively restores proper movement so that it can support an injured area and prevent that same injury from coming back again. And then, of course, when we talk about ongoing fitness and performance, the nervous system is so relevant for all sorts of things. The nervous system, of course, regulates our energy and hormones and autonomic nervous system and how effectively we handle stress. And so it's just such a huge influence. It is the influence in our day-to-day quality of life. And so there's so many wonderful benefits from offering these more fitness-oriented services to patients, just in terms of mood and affect and quality of life and enjoyment. And it's a good way to deepen your relationship with them. And then as we also talk about athletic performance, so many times what we want, or what your athletes want, are the qualities like strength, which is a neurological skill, like speed, which has to do with the underlying neurological skill of intermuscular coordination and the rate of force development and the rate of muscular relaxation. And they're looking for, different populations looking for improved balance, which of course is neurological. It's the ability to perceive where the body is in space and adjust in time one's balance to catch their balance before they fall. So there could also be long-term peripheral neuropathy patients who have deficits in sensation in their feet and stuff like that. So there's applications here. There's so many applications because the nervous system is so relevant to any goals that any of your patients have. And one of the cool opportunities here, just to mention the other dot, or connect the other dot that you mentioned there, Nathan, in terms of these other services, is that so many times we hear from practice owners that they have had completed this plan of care with a patient, used the Neubie device throughout, and that patient wants more. Their plan of care is complete, but they want to continue on. And so it makes perfect sense to find ways to offer services that once the plan of care is over, you can continue to serve that patient, continue to nurture and deepen that relationship. And you can, of course, when the plan of care is done, some practices are hybrid, some are cash, but even if you're billing insurance completely throughout that plan of care, once that's done, then you absolutely can do as bona fide fitness, wellness, performance services that are cash and not covered.
Yeah, it was interesting as I was trying to describe our conversation or the Neubie itself, it was hard because it's not just palliative, it's also therapeutic, and it's also restorative. There's so many aspects to it. It was hard to frankly describe what it does for people. And like you said, it's not just athletes. And I thought, by the way, it was super cool how you guys were able to highlight your effect on Saquon Barkley after they won the Super Bowl. I thought that was pretty cool. I did see that. I saw your posts.
Awesome.
So congratulations on that. But how it also can affect the 80-year-old person with a diabetic neuropathy with improved measures, right? You guys did a recent study with the group at Hands-On Diagnostics and showed significant improvement objectively in the nervous systems of these people with diabetic neuropathies after the utilization of Neubie. So it extends throughout the spectrum, which is what I guess I'm trying to say. And so that's really cool regarding the device. And what we're talking about today is about also adding these services that aren't just therapy based, because I think it's a dream of any therapy owner, correct me if I'm wrong, to have some kind of service that's outside of the insurance environment. That's a dream, to not have to deal with insurances anymore if they're currently in that. So the Neubie provides that opportunity. You also see that with laser. Many clinic owners have decided about or tried to decide if they want to do some kind of gym concept. There's even the stretch lab type of concept that they can add to their clinic. And so you guys, what I was alluding to earlier when I introduced you is you have a cash-based service centered around the Neubie. Is it in Austin? Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we do. And
so you guys know where you're coming from. You guys know, what this is all about as far as providing the cash-based service, not just this tool, but also providing the cash-based service as well.
Absolutely. So we have this, all cash clinic here. We have a couple physical therapists and then a few personal trainers, and we do that whole continuum of care where we do physical therapy. We actually see quite a few neuro patients. It's kind of underserved population. So we have people coming in wheelchairs all day long with stroke, spinal cord injury, MS. We have a very vibrant neuropathy program, and then certainly sports medicine, post-surgical, orthopedic, and a lot of local athletes coming in. So we get this whole blend, and then people who continue on and do fitness, or some even that just come in and see us because they got referred in for training and they're not even injured. So it's a whole mix. If I may actually also go back, you mentioned this neuropathy study, and this is interesting for a few reasons. So I would like to just expand on that for a moment. And this study came out, was published in the Journal of Diabetes Research in the first quarter of this year, March of 2025. So it's new since we were last did any of these, any content together, and since your last in-person event. And in terms of the relevance to this topic of cash pay, it is relevant because my understanding after talking to several compliance experts is that Medicare typically does not cover electrical stimulation for diagnoses like neuropathy.
Right.
And so that's an opportunity to have a cash-based service. Of course, please consult with your own compliance person. I'm not telling you what to do. You got to talk to your own people, but there's an opportunity there. And so I thought it was worth expanding on this. So this study that Nathan mentioned, one of the reasons I'm so excited about it is that it's actually the first time that we're aware of in the scientific literature that there's a head-to-head comparison between the effects of alternating current and direct current on humans. There's some research on animal models and different things dating back. But this is the first time head-to-head in humans that we get to actually compare. And so it was a really cool study where we had 150 patients, so really good statistical power. 75 of them, half the patients, got traditional alternating current. So think TENS unit, interferential, Russian stim, FES, traditional alternating current devices. So it was a TENS unit in that case. And with that half of the participants, what happened is what most people expected, which is some improvement in pain, right? There's some symptom management, some palliative care, but no real improvements in function. So, it's some value and what people expected. With the direct current of the Neubie, what happened was amazing, where not only was there at least as much, if not more, improvement in pain, but there were also improvements in function, improvements in sensation, activities of daily living, their ability to do that, and also as measured by EMG and nerve conduction velocity testing. So in your wheelhouse, Nathan, these patients saw improvements in EMG amplitude in just 6 weeks, improvements in nerve conduction velocity. So there's actually, literally regeneration of axon, remyelination of these nerves happening. And so it validates this hypothesis that we've had and some of this evidence that we've seen in animal models over the years, that direct current has this unique and very valuable effect on human tissue. And so this is something that we've been saying for many years, and to finally have this study that compares head to head these two different categories of electrical current is really exciting. And then that opportunity to leverage that to share that study locally with physicians or directly with patients in your local communities has been a wonderful opportunity for us and others even already.
Yeah, definitely. And you want to have that it's nice to have that evidence-based support in the background as you're providing some of these services, right? You want to do as much as you can to say, yeah, it feels good, but it's also showing these kind of effects, right? So it's very powerful. So talking about your cash-based service and the fact that you bring in this tool to help many therapy owners and even non-therapy owners, athletic trainers, like I said, sports organizations, collegiate places, but for places where we're trying to make a profit, right? As you bring this in to a clinic of any size, what do you recognize? What are some of the things they need to consider first, right? So because I think this extends beyond Neubie, whether it's laser or vasomimetic devices or some other kind of cash-based service, what do they need to consider maybe before they bring on a service like this, especially if it's their first foray into it? What do you guys recommend people do before they take on a cash-based service like this to make it most successful?
If you're listening to this and you already have cash services, then you understand this. If you don't yet have cash, if you're all insurance, then there's a little bit of a mind shift. But when you hear it, it'll just be sort of like, oh yeah, duh, or like, yeah, sort of just makes sense. But the number one thing that I think we need to consider is that if someone is going to pay cash out of pocket, we have to deliver enough value to motivate them to do that. If they're going to pay $150 to $200 for a session, they have to feel like they're getting $250 to $300 of value. They have to feel like they're getting at least as much in value, if not a surplus, so that they're willing to do that. So, I mean, that is just sort of the foundational concept that we need there. And so if you're looking at traditional physical therapy, which, the people, Nathan, in your audience are a little more advanced in this. And so you listening probably are not in the traditional PT mill type of setting where, you're just having people do the, kind of wimpy exercises, just doing a little bit of stim and ice, just kind of churning through people. But in a more typical, more traditional PT environment like that, a lot of people, there's 1, 2, 3 dropout rates are high, even when sessions are covered by insurance. And why is that? It's because they think, this isn't really helping me. It's not really worth the time. It might not be worth my copay, even if that's not a lot of money. It might be stuff that, I feel like I can do this at home. And so there's all these things. So if you want to be able to charge cash to somebody, you have to show them that you can help them. Of course, some of this comes down to how you speak to them, your intake process, talking to them about what their goals are, communicating confidently that you have a path to help them get there, that you're going to be their partner on this journey to help them get there, and then being able to show them very quickly that you can at least make some positive change so they can get a glimpse of where you're going. That is the fastest way to gain trust. The Speed of Trust is a great book. One of the fastest ways to gain trust is to deliver an early result. So when you can go through a treatment with something like the Neubie all the time, in our own clinic multiple times a day, and we hear hundreds and hundreds of these amazing stories of someone who comes in their first session, they have this aha moment, this 5-minute miracle. They touch their toes for the first time in 10 years, or they walk without drop foot or with a smoother gait for the first time in years and years and years, or their back doesn't hurt for the first time in 6 weeks, or their shoulder goes from 30 degrees of abduction up nearly overhead. I mean, these types of breakthroughs happen all the time. And in our data, we've seen 91 to 92% of patients notice functional improvements and or reductions in pain in their first session. So being able to create this immediate impact to show them that you are different, that you are going to help them. Whereas they might perceive that some practices are trying to just milk them for more sessions, they know that you are invested in helping them get the best outcome for them. When you can provide that type of experience, they're fired up. They want to work with you because they're not getting that other places. So if you can have that type of approach and mindset and framework for treatment, that to me is the biggest catalyst for growth. And even if you get someone out a few sessions quicker, they're going to tell their friends, or they're going to want to stay on and pay cash and do more with you even after their plan of care is over. And it leads to all of these wonderful things, the referrals, the retention, the increased patient satisfaction. And that over time, I think, is the best recipe for growing your business. I really think that things you can do to provide immediate value and show that glimpse of how valuable you really are is a huge key.
Yeah, something that you started off with in that answer is something that is not a strong suit of most therapists that I know of. And you were essentially talking about sales, right? And in a in-network therapy environment, they're coming to us because they're getting prescribed it, right? And we kind of have to sell them on our plan of care to get them to come and create that value, show some immediate impact, whether we have a device for us or not that shows immediate impact like yours. We have to provide something to get them to come. And one of those tactics is being a good salesperson, like selling the plan of care. Listen, this is how long it's going to take. This is what you're going to have to commit to. And if you're able to do these things, most of the time we're able to get you these kind of results, or we'll get you these functional we can meet some functional goals that you have. We can get some measurements that are significantly better than what you currently have, but you have to commit to this. And that sales ability definitely is lacking a lot of the time. And so what I guess I want to stress as I'm listening to you, and to stress to the audience, is the importance of getting in a sales mindset. Because now when you're in a cash-based service, people aren't coming to you because they're prescribed it. They're coming to you because they're wanting something that they think you have. And you've got to be able to sell it and provide that value pretty quickly, right? I think that's a very different mindset that cash-based therapy owners and non-cash-based therapy owners have. Is the cash-based therapy owners recognize the necessity to provide value quickly and to sell their service. Whereas the others they're not focused on that. They don't have to focus on that. And so understanding that you're going to have to shift mindsets, right? And also treat this, would you say you have to treat it like a different business underneath the same roof? Would you go that far?
I would say yes in the beginning, but ultimately, even if there is a cash component of your business, I think they all should eventually adopt this mindset of having an effective, as you said, Nathan, sales process. So, if you have a practice, sales is a huge driver. If you can help people, one interesting belief and mental framework to take on is to understand that if you think you can help a patient, you have a moral obligation to convince them to consume your services, to come and work with you. And so sales is not like, oftentimes we have these limiting beliefs because of past experiences where sales is sort of slimy, trying to trick people into getting something that they don't really need or want. And sales in honorable clinics and honorable professions like physical therapy, sales is really an avenue for helping someone come to the conclusion of their own that they wish to purchase your services. And there's, I think the way we frame that up just totally changes our outlook and our attitude and our internal feeling when we're having quote unquote sales conversations. So one definition that I've heard too, that I also just feel compelled to share on this topic, definition of sales that I heard, I think is the most concise and perhaps powerful definition, is that sales is the transference of belief. So in other words, if you have a high amount of conviction in your ability to help this patient, or even if you're not over promising, you don't necessarily know you can help them. If you're confident that what you're going to do is the best for them, you're going to try this, you think it has a chance of helping, but if it doesn't, you're going to try this, you're going to try this. If you have conviction and confidence in what your plan is, all it is your job to communicate that. Use your professional opinion. You're not trying to sell them anything they don't want or need. Obviously, they're in your office for a reason. You're not trying to trick them into anything. You're being transparent. You're being upfront. But the way that you present that, I think just sort of changing that framework helps shifts the entire dynamic in a hugely positive direction.
Gotcha. Someone brought up in the chat, Caroline mentioned she works with speech language pathologists who are very by the book, and you've probably come up against this as well, as you've introduced, or an owner has come to you and they want to introduce the Neubie into their clinic, right? Have you had instances or situations where the other providers on the team are they're not sold? Like, we're not sure why we're doing this. How do you get that across to the other providers that what we're doing here, yes, it's outside of the insurance model because it's cash-based, but this is in the best interest of our patients. This is in the best interest of the business. How do you talk to those owners or get them engaged into the program?
This is a great topic. And did you say it was Carolyn?
Yeah.
Because I can't see it up here, but for Carolyn's reference, there are many SLPs around the country using this too. So that's kind of a cool application. But,
that's cool.
To the question there, I think the process of convincing a staff clinician or an owner to bring this on, it is essentially the same in the sense that there's a range of people. In our experience, there's this notion of crossing the chasm when there's the diffusion of innovation or new technology. There's some of these people who their mindset is such that at least in this domain, they're more innovators or early adopters. And so based on hearing something that resonates with them or having the feeling of seeing it or seeing it with a patient or feeling it on themselves, it really clicks in a way that they're willing to adopt it, that early adopter. And then there's other people that are the early majority or the later majority who need to see more instances of others. Instead of seeing one or two people use it, they need to see dozens use it. Anecdotal evidence or anecdata, they need to see 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 studies. There has to be some threshold of proof before they're willing to adopt it. And so I think for the owner who has a staff clinician who is resistant to something like this, it's sort of the same approach across the board, where we have to sort of see, oftentimes it's a matter of letting them experience it, saying, okay, well, do you have any aches and pains? Let me try it on you, just the same way that someone tried it on me. And so oftentimes when that staff clinician feels it and they have their own 5-minute miracle or their own aha moment breakthrough, then they're like, okay, they start to buy in. Or if they see patients of other staff clinicians having these types of breakthrough moments, eventually you win them over. So it's a matter of that. But then also some of them want to see more of the studies, or they can read, not to just plug my book, but they can read the NeuFit method book. They can look at peer-reviewed scientific journal articles like the one we talked about on diabetic neuropathy, or other peer-reviewed research articles on functional recovery in MS patients, or muscle hypertrophy using the device that is, you can get muscle hypertrophy that's as significant as doing traditional resistance exercise, but with little to no external load. So I think it's a matter of finding what that particular clinician, where they're more inclined, where they're more interested, and then helping them see for themselves how a tool like this can help them amplify their effects in that area. There's a couple of common sources of resistance too. One is, where's the research, stuff like that. We just talked about that. The answer is it's either here or it's coming, right? And then there's also sometimes resistance of like, well, I went to PT school and I'm a skilled manual therapist. What do I want to use a tool like that for that's going to replace me or my skill set or something like that? So some of it is reframing and understanding. I've had at this point dozens of practice owners tell me that they never thought that they had no modalities in their practice. They never thought they'd ever buy anything like the Neubie, but they've started to use it and they've come to love it because they've learned that it doesn't replace their clinical skill set, it enhances or it amplifies it. So they can use it, they can connect it to the electric glove and do manual therapy. Whenever they would be doing corrective exercises with their patients anyway, but now when they map around and find neurological deficits and use the Neubie, it amplifies, it enhances significantly the benefits of those corrective exercises. So they still use their clinical skill set. Now it's like having the ultimate point of leverage. There's that Archimedes quote, you give me a place to stand in a long enough lever, I can move the earth, right? If you have this leverage, this more powerful tool, you can do the stuff that you're going to do as a skilled, trained clinician already. You can just get more return on that investment of time and effort and energy.
Yeah, I can see what you're talking about, because we had to fold in electrodiagnostics into our practices back in the day. So we were doing EMGs and ultrasounds, and it was easier for us if we were able to tie that program into the overall purpose, mission, and how it aligns with our values, right? If we're able to enroll them into how this aligns with everything that we're already doing, yes, it's an adjunct thing that's outside of the insurance realm, but it's supported by the research, it's readily available, and it's creating great results that's in line with what we're already doing, then it's an easy transition into it. And some work still had to be done along the process. I had to look at new patients that had come in and weren't being referred over to electrodiagnostics to get an EMG, and just have some training there. So for some people, it required a little bit of training, like you said. There are the early adopters who are, this is super exciting, but then there's the late adopters who want to see some evidence, right? Mm-hmm. Or they're not quite sure, they haven't put the pieces of the puzzle together, and that's okay. But we can say, hey, here's someone with this neurological deficit. Why don't we figure out what's actually going on with their nervous system and do an EMG? And I can see that being the same with you, in that, hey, this is supposed to enhance our care, and it can if it's used on these people in this way, and this is how it works best. Now you can get their mind thinking about how it can be a support. Right? Whatever that thing is, it can be a supportive to what you're currently doing and enhance the care that you're providing and help the patient get better faster, right? That's what we're going for. If we're going to be super powerful as providers, then our power is shown in our ability to get people better faster. And if we can do that in one visit, that's more powerful than doing it in 10 visits. And if this gets us to that point where we're going from 10 visits down to 7 visits, that's in the best interest of the patient. And that's ultimately in your best interest, because someone who gets better faster compared to other providers down the street, man, you're going to get busier. That's good for business, right?
Yeah.
So helping them put those pieces of the puzzle together can really help.
And that's beautifully said. Tying back, bringing in technology like the Neubie to the overall mission of the practice, and also their vision for themselves as a clinician. I think that's a really powerful. I'm so glad you made that point. And then also in terms of this notion of getting a patient to their goals, to their milestones in fewer sessions. Some clinicians do confess to being nervous about that, because the session volume will go down. But I can't tell you now how many just organic relationships we have with surgeons here in our community in Austin, because we see people post-operatively and they go back to their surgeon. Their surgeon's like, "What the heck are you doing? You're like way ahead of schedule."
Oh, and cool.
So we have several that they mostly refer to practices that are in network. But there's a good number of them that mention NeuFit, like, hey, if you want to pay cash and you want to do something that's going to really accelerate your rate of recovery, go to NeuFit. So we have really good relationships and referrals with some of these surgeons too, because they see that. And if you have a hybrid practice and you are in network with some, it's even easier to get those referrals too. But it's something that definitely happens, and the results really do speak for themselves and help you stand out.
Right. Do you, Caroline said that's a great idea to have research and patient stories readily available to back up your ideas or these new tools. I was going to ask, for those people who are considering a cash-based service in athletic performance, I'm sure you've seen the opposite side. What are they doing? What are the pitfalls to look out for for those who are initially really excited about bringing on this new thing, this new program, and then it just kind of falls apart, and over time it starts collecting dust? What are they doing, or what are they not doing that you've seen? Have you seen a pattern to that?
I'd say there's a few main influences on how effectively, a clinic does in implementing something like that, a new program. I mean, some of it comes to, behavior change and how difficult it can be to drive behavior change within organizations. And so, there's some of that goes to the business aspects of strategic planning and having someone really own the initiative of starting this new line of business, this new vertical, and perhaps even having incentives around it, or being reporting on it in weekly or monthly meetings, so that there's some accountability around it. So I think it's something that, it's like, if you have 3 bosses, you have none, or if you have 3 quarterbacks, you have none. So, one person ultimately, I think, needs to own it, and there needs to be some transparency and accountability around any sort of new initiative. And, of course, buy-in among the team and systems and processes for introducing people to, as patients are getting towards the end of their plan of care, having them do, it could be even part of a physical therapy session, but doing some work that's a little more strength-oriented, return-to-play-oriented, a little bit of a taste, like they're dipping their toe in the water of fitness and performance training, using the Neubie in that way, or something like that, where they're going to, the patient is going to see what it's like. And, like we, for example, sometimes if someone is in rehabbing a lower body, and for example, knee injury or post-op surgical recovery, we might have them do at the end of one of their, as they're trending towards the end of their plan of care, have them do 2 or 3 minutes of just unweighted bicep curls with the Neubie on. And it's one of these things where we tell them, all right, now, it doesn't feel like you did very much right now, right? Yeah, right. Well, look, we're using this machine to get as much muscle recruitment as if you're lifting very heavy weights. So even though you just did 50 movements without weights in your hands, imagine you did 50 lifting really heavy weights. So your arms might actually get sore. And when they do have some delayed onset muscle soreness, and not that soreness is necessarily the goal of training, and there's a whole different discussion there, but it is very enlightening. And if you manage your expectations and say, all right, look, if you do get sore, it's probably going to peak 48 to 72 hours from now. And just understand, just remember, that's all we did was 50 movements like this with unweighted arm curls. And if they did that normally, it wouldn't have an effect. They wouldn't even remember it a few minutes later, let alone a few days later. But just remember, that's all we did. So they can start to see the effect of how, wow, this is really working my muscles. And you can talk to them about how they're able to do that, get that much load on their muscles, for example, without having to get the strain and stress on their joints and the risk of injury or re-injury. So you can start to plant the seeds, actually. So having a process around when to introduce it, around having perhaps a discount on the first session or first package when they transition from the end of the plan of care into more training, long-term fitness, maintenance, wellness-oriented services. So there's some things to do process-wise around there. And then, having someone who owns it. Also, understanding that, when using something like the Neubie, there also is training that goes into it. You want to make sure that the person who's implementing the services is confident doing what they're doing. Of course, you're already aware of that as a professional and a practice owner. So that's certainly part of it.
Well, I think I really like what you're talking about, because I can see where it falls short. If the owner who has green-lighted this program has not either established or had someone else create an intentional program for implementation and follow-up, right? So it's essentially what you might consider a business plan within your business, or a project within your business, if you want to use that word. And I love what you said about giving one person the ownership. We saw the same thing when we did the EMG stuff. Is we were studying and training for a couple of years, and it wasn't really gaining traction until we said, forget this. Someone has to be responsible for it. And that in that situation, it was me, so Will could focus on the other things. And then I had to spearhead the EMG thing, and that's one thing I took over with the plan to eventually hand it off to someone else. But that was the intention. And once we did that, then we started seeing numbers increase, right? So putting one person in charge of leading out on the project or the program, whatever it is, and then understanding, okay, these are the KPIs, these are the metrics we need to track to make sure this is going to be a appropriate and get a return on our investment and see the things that we want to see. And this is how we're going to report them and how often we're going to report them and who to report them. And this is our structure. So being intentional about some of that structure for an organization at the very beginning is super important. Secondly, how are you going to implement it? So like you said, this is going to be a minor disruption to what people are already doing. And most therapists they kind of are in their groove. They don't like to disrupt what their normal flow is, right? They might go to a continuing education course and throw in, a manual maneuver here or there or a new exercise. But that's fine as long as it's within the construct of the way I currently move and groove. But so this is a little bit out of the ordinary. How are we going to teach them? How are we going to train these providers? How are we going to implement it so it is as smooth as possible into the regular flow of patient care? And I love what you talk about, because one of the things that constantly comes up with any of these modalities or programs that we're talking about that I've heard over time is, let's throw it in there in the middle of patient care, or maybe it's even at the first part of patient care, to supplement our care. And maybe we'll do it on one limb. And if it's a bilateral thing, we'll just do it on one limb, give it for a few minutes, really the basic introduction of it, and see what the response is, right? And if the patient is super excited about it, favorable about it, then it sold itself, right? That's how we did it. But that's just one way of introducing it. And then also understanding that it might take some training. And what does that look like to implement this into the program? Training of the providers, and then how are we going to make this successful? You can always change that. You go into a battle plan, you can always change it at some point. But at least we're going to follow up with it with regular KPIs, regular meetings, regular reports to see how it's done, so this does not fall off and collect dust on the shelf, right? So I love how you laid that all out. That's exactly what we had to do as well before it really gained traction and became its own thing. It had its own revenue stream, a separate revenue stream, and became a real boon to the business.
That's awesome. Yeah. And of course, this notion of having accountability and KPIs and having a scoreboard and tracking, it's much easier if you already have that in place. So that might be a prerequisite, is sort of, and you mentioned traction, like I'm a big fan of the book Traction and the EOS entrepreneurial operating system. So installing something like that first, if you don't have that yet, in terms of having a system and a cadence for weekly meetings, tracking your scorecard, doing strategic planning, making sure you have the right people in the right seats, so you know who would be the person to have ownership of this new initiative within your practice, right? All these things are sort of prerequisites too. So just to highlight some of what you were saying there, Nathan.
Yeah, I think, and if you already have some of that in place, then it's much easier, right? Because if we already are having the meeting and it's just an additional KPI, or maybe it's one additional update that is needed on a weekly basis, then it's really easy to implement some of these things. And to reiterate, Traction by Gino Wickman is something that I reference quite a bit. We've referenced quite a bit as we're coaching our clients. It's a great book to follow. Yeah, so I can see where you're coming from. Recognizing where this cash-based service is going to take a measure of sales. It's going to have some intention and structure before you even get it off the ground, to make sure that you're following it, make sure it gets the ultimate runway to be successful, right? Yeah. And so obviously you guys have done a lot of this. And what more past those few things would you recommend, or what have you seen otherwise in patterns of successful people who have implemented cash pay programs?
Well, there's different components to it. I mean, one is, and I think it really all goes back to this notion that we talked about earlier of, if you want someone to happily pay you cash, take out their credit card or cash, literally, you have to be able to provide them value. And so some of the things that have been successful for us and for other practice owners is finding opportunities for this experience to sell itself. So, we talked about when someone comes in for an initial session, initial assessment, being able to show them that aha moment, that breakthrough, that 5-minute miracle. And the same is true, and this is why there can be so much value in bringing something like the Neubie out to a marathon or like the fitness events or CrossFit events or stuff like that, going around and having something that people can come and try, for someone to sit there and, if you're going out and have them doing compression boots, that's cool, but a lot of people have that. But if you go around and they feel a little bit better, but if you go out and you bring something like the Neubie and you help them really have a meaningful breakthrough, that's a lot different than like, oh yeah, I feel a little better, like because I got my compression boots, right? Of course, I'm not trying to poo-poo that. There's value in that, but it's just a whole different level of, wow, you did something for me that I want more of that sort of thing. So I think that's, finding opportunities like that to be able to give people that experience so that they say, yes, I'm willing to invest my time and my money to have more of that experience that you just gave me. I think that's been a really, just generally that approach, whether it's, to businesses going around to, health and wellness events or local fairs, trade show, stuff like that, any sort of opportunities like that. When you have something that can really create fast results for people, being able to have opportunities to do that, to have someone see in 5 or 10 minutes how much better they feel, I think those are always really, really good opportunities.
Yeah, I know you guys have plenty of promotional materials, and so that helps on the marketing side. So people have to recognize if they're going to bring on some kind of project like this, that's going to take a significant marketing effort, right? And you guys, I know you have a number of promotional materials regarding quite a few diagnoses as to the benefits of something like this, but recognizing whatever it is that the marketing material needs to be ready to go, right? It needs to be something that's created, and that there is space for you to market this. I'm assuming you come across plenty of owners who have a lot of different projects going on at the same time because they might have that entrepreneurial mind. And so it's nice to have the ready-made materials done for you. But you have to recognize that it's going to take a marketing effort, because we would like to think that word of mouth is like it is the best way to market, to get people who really know, like, and trust you. But it's got to get to the people first. And you got to have a pretty clear marketing program, or marketing strategy at least, ready to go, right?
Yeah. If you want an avalanche, you need to have the first snowball. And so getting it started. So there's ways that, some of the ways to get it started are, like we just talked about a moment ago, go out and do local events or things like that. But you also, you're an established practice owner who likely has, an email list of past patients and stuff like that too. So sending out something, and then Nathan, you had mentioned earlier, some of this content that we have with people like Saquon Barkley or Mike Tyson or stuff like that. So if you send an email out, and if you have a list of 500 to 5,000 or more past patients, and you send out, hey, we have this new technology, it helped Saquon Barkley, get healthy and work at perform at his best level to help win the Super Bowl. You send out, here's a video of him using it. We have this now. If you want to come and train like the pros, come in and try out a first session at a discounted price or something like that. So there's an opportunity. It doesn't necessarily have to be go out and pound the pavement, especially if you have an established business already. And this, marketing to your past patients can be wonderful. And we can, provide some materials on like a video like that, or some still images like that, can likely get that first few snowballs that can then build into the avalanche.
I love that you brought that up, because I think that's a resource that a lot of owners don't leverage enough. I think they want to focus on physicians and getting referrals, and going out to the community is a good idea. But anyone who's been in business for a while should have a laundry list of patients that they can use as a resource to market to as well. And I don't think we pay enough attention to that, because these people have already experienced us, and the majority of them already know and trust us. And when we tell them we've got this higher level of technology, this better resource for you to improve your health of you, your friends, or your family, come and check it out. That's much easier to sell them, right? It's cheaper. That level of marketing is significantly cheaper as well. I know that many companies would love to have an email list of thousands that they can reference and market to. And we as owners already have that amongst our patients, and we should be collecting emails on a regular basis so that we can reach out to them when we do have them to opportunities to improve their health. We should be leveraging those, and people pay good money for lists like that when we inherently already have those. So I love that you brought up the need to focus a lot of our marketing strategies on the current lists that we have.
Yeah, it's a big resource. Don't overlook it. Just echoing what Nathan said.
Great. Well, hey, thank you for sharing so much of your time and telling us a lot about the Neubie as well. Anything more you want to share as it pertains to implementing these kind of programs into our practices and what to look out for?
See, anything else? I think that the biggest sort of paradigm shift that we have here is just going back to what we talked about at the very beginning, is this really nervous system first approach. And I think that influential people like Andrew Huberman and his podcast, and there's sort of a lot more awareness of the brain and the nervous system. So I think there's opportunities here to sort of use that in messaging, and that's going to resonate with more people now. Whereas 5 or 10 years ago, they might have just heard it, might have gone over their heads, in one ear, out the other, right? And so doing things like, there's another protocol that's one of our core four, that our 4 most often used protocols, is what we call the master reset, or our quote unquote electric meditation, which is something that we use and we have a study in the works now that is already showing increases in heart rate variability, which of course, as you know, is a measure of the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system. So many people are aware of the adverse health effects of stress these days. So being able to have additional services like that, where you can talk about helping someone manage their stress so that it can improve digestion or sleep or reproductive function or endocrine function, whatever it might be. So, I think that message, and then that's sort of also related to what we talked about, how that's the common thread throughout all these issues. But, in terms of sports injuries, being able to focus on the neurological response to injury as opposed to just the bones, muscles, connective tissue, et cetera, being able to focus on that really has led to these breakthroughs. So, you can tell I'm really passionate about this work. And I imagine that you are listening to this, understand the value of the nervous system. I'm not saying anything new to you in that regard. You understand how important the nervous system is for so many reasons related to health and healing. I think that the biggest sort of addition here is that now there's a way to operationalize that, to repeatedly, reliably, and powerfully find where the nervous system needs. It's sort of like reprogramming software, where you need to put this patch in or where you need to reprogram. There's a reliable, now powerful way to find where that issue is, a deficit or limitation is, and then re-educate, repattern, recalibrate that to make change very quickly.
I like how you're saying the neurological approach, because I believe physical therapists particularly are musculoskeletal experts, and this makes our care a little bit more holistic, to not just rely on the musculoskeletal portion of it, but also introduce a way to provide therapy that is neurologically based. And I think that can be super helpful. And it's cool to hear, Caroline made the comment, it's cool to hear that also reaches to the speech and language pathologists as well. So if people wanted to reach out to you and get information, I did put the website, I hope it's right, neupttech.com.
No.
Is that not right?
No.
I'm going to delete that right now. Tell me where to go. Tell everyone where to go.
You can do neufit.com or it forwards to new.fit. It's neu.fit.
All right. I'm going to throw that down in the chat. So that's not right. neu.fit?
Yes.
Okay. My apologies if that takes people to the wrong place.
Oh, yeah.
I hope it doesn't. So I'm sure that's correct. If people wanted to reach out to you, are you on social media somewhere?
Yeah, definitely. I have recently started a personal Instagram page. It's my Garrett.Salpeter, my first and last name. Would love to connect and DM with you on there. And then we also, our NeuFit page is NeuFit on both Facebook and Instagram, NeuFit RFP for rehab, fitness, and performance. And there's a good mix of educational, informative, and entertaining content on there.
Yeah, I highly recommend people check it out. You guys have some great content, great stuff, and you're doing good things for the rehab setting, that's for sure. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you for tuning in.